What is going on? We're back with the Vigor Life podcast, and I'm excited because we got, people on the show again. Not to say we're not gonna do a lot of, solo Q&As and things like that. I actually really enjoy doing it. But my brother from another is in town, Andy McCloy, back in the building. This is the third time for him being on the show. I think you're up there. Man.
I'm up
I might
there.
be matching the top attendance. But we were talking about so Andy came into town for us to work together. We have a business together called Built to Last. If you go to builttolastgym.com, you'll find out all about it. But it's, again, consulting business. What we do is help gym owners grow their business, build their training systems, build a real business that lasts, hence Built to Last. But we'll chat more about that. But actually, he was also doing an in-staff for my team, which was excellent, about how to be an A player, right, and build your career in this industry. Not only become great at what you do, but again, build a career, make good money, impact people and feel good about what you're doing, have purpose and meaning. Now, we realized that there's really not a lot of shows and breakdowns, and this is what we teach inside of our Built to Last mentorship, of three different things. So that's what we're going to cover today in today's podcast episode. Number one is building your training system. Number two is developing a team of A players. All right, and we'll talk about what that is. But this has been actually really, really insightful for a lot of the people that we coach, because one of the things that we talk about is when you do a lot of the business coaching, what's the first thing to have? Everybody teaches, by the way, nothing wrong with that, right? How to get more leads, sales, scale. And it's all great things. But with that said, the most important part of your business is the product/service, which is coaching first. That's one of our values at Built to Last, is coaching first, meaning your product, just you go to a restaurant, the food better be great for you to come back, right? Hey, your coaching and your culture better be great for people to come back. And so we actually teach this stuff to help people make better products and services. And then we teach the rest of it: operational excellence, unreasonable service, educate the marketplace, meaning position yourself as an expert, personal leadership, right? All the systems on the back end. Yes, absolutely. But it's got to be built on a great product. So you had a great presentation for our crew in Built to Last on building your training system.
Yeah.
And there's kind of three things that we covered in there. Was discussing why you need a training system. A lot of people don't have it. We've coached a lot of people in the last 13 years of business. How yours has evolved, how mine has evolved over time too. And then best practices for training system development, right?
Yep.
So, but let's start with that. Because a lot of people probably say, well, why do I need a training system? But look, again, we're not going to shit on anything. We're going to just give our opinions and viewpoints. But, even bigger franchises have training systems now. Do we believe that they're great training systems based on the science and the application of this? And for us doing it over 20 years, I don't know, right? But a lot of people don't have training systems. How do we know? Because we coach them.
Yes.
Right. So let's dive into that one. Why does a gym that to be successful or long haul need a training system?
Yeah. Well, to come to what you were talking about, we can use some big, what I call commoditized fitness brands. If you look at Orange Theory, if you look at F45, they have training systems. Now, I think they serve their purpose, but I don't think anybody who's been doing this for a long time would confuse what they do with great programming. But there is a system that makes it easy for their members to understand what they do every single day. In the spirit of Donald Miller, if you confuse, you lose.
Yep.
It makes it very easy for their trainers to understand the process of which they're taking clients through every single day. And in theory, if you are committed to being a great coach, you can probably create a better product than those companies that I just talked about.
Yeah.
Because they're not looking for super high level coaches to run those programs. If you're a high level coach and you're really good at programming, you have an opportunity to create something and put it in the marketplace that is better. And then that's where things like marketing and sales come in. That's how you put it on rocket fuel. But if the product isn't good, that's a problem. And in my experience, working with most trainers and gyms, their product is a little all over the place. And if you don't have a streamlined focus for the product, it really affects the culture.
Yep.
And you see that in a lot of gyms that have independent contractors, but you also see it inside of a lot of gyms that are either running a small group model or sport performance model, that they really haven't taken the time to think through, how do I systemize this? how do I structure this? So not only the clients get predictable results, but we have a predictable path on how to train a coach and make sure that they can do the job really well.
And here's the thing, right? I think that when we talk about systems, we've both experienced this because we went from being, a solopreneur, only person trainer, to then, building a team, and the team gets bigger and so on and so forth. Now teaching this stuff. There isn't, and let me know your thoughts on this, right? Because it's kind of like people that love coaching, that love training, essentially end up being you want to be creative, right? And it's like, but you can't scale creativity. And by the way, you can't scale creativity and get results. So, I built a small group personal training system through, obviously, doing it a lot and then figuring out man, I can't. Okay, I tried to give this to others to do, and as soon as it tries to be scaled, it doesn't work anymore. So you got to create a system that people can stick to, that I know works, and I could go and teach it in Australia or Germany. And it's like, hey, here's the system you guys use. By the way, which is 1,100 people now in the world are using it, and it works, right? And if you have XYZ coaches and you're teaching them the system that is going to deliver the thing, there has to be a system. And it's I think that sometimes that becomes an issue, right? It's oh man, you as a trainer have done so many programs that you're bored of it, but it's the people are not, right? But just give me your insight on that too. How did you evolve your training system? Because I think too, I'll share mine, and there's a lot of kind of crossing paths here.
Yeah.
How did you get to today? Maybe some obstacles, right? How did you learn a good system? How did you run into a wall? Man, this ain't gonna work, right? And then what is it now today evolved through those, I would say, obstacles?
So I think there's two ways that you can approach building a training system. You borrow or you build. Most of us start out borrowing. And that's exactly what I did. Very early on, going back early 2000, literally 2000, 1999, I had been exposed to Gary Gray's stuff. I also had a big powerlifting background just as a teenager. So I also started learning about Westside Barbell. Yeah, that's about the time I started learning about Westside. And even Charlie Francis, right? So I had all these influences. And when I started training people, it's I would take a little bit of this, I would take a little bit of that. And it worked really well. It really did. But there became a point in time where I realized that this kind of mashup that I was doing was not optimal. Because early on, when you're borrowing, you often don't really know the rules, so you don't know how to break the rules. Correct. And where the rubber met the road for me was I first started working with high schools, and I had full control over what they did at school. And I'm a tier system guy. Joe Ken's been my biggest mentor. So I ran the tier system. Kids at that school who I trained their team, when they came to me after school to train privately, I had a bolt-on program to that. So we didn't repeat things that they did at school. But other kids that I had coming from other schools, I was really kind of using this Westside Barbell, Charlie Francis mashup type of thing that I was doing. And I just had this epiphany one day. It's oh, wait a minute. That's not what they need. I'm not even doing it that way with the kids where I control their training. Why would I do it that way with kids that I don't? So I started to figure out that our sport performance program had to become essentially a supplement to what they do at school. I knew by this time I'd learned about competing adaptations and periodization, and I understood Prilepins really well. And I realized the only way to do this right is if you don't try to compete with what they do at school. And that kind of shifted my brain back to coaches that have inspired me, that had a more, for lack of better words, a balanced model that wasn't so intense, right? There wasn't max effort days and dynamic effort days that are really nervous system intensive. And that was Boyle. And I think it was around 2004, I went to his gym. I did a 4-day mentorship there. And that was the first time I saw a training system in action. And I was oh, wow. Everything from top to bottom was set up for efficiency, even the way the gym was laid out.
Yep.
And I was oh man, this is it. So then I started taking what I learned from Mike and the experience that I developed working with high school athletes, both in a private and team setting, and really started creating this model of ours. And over time, we've really refined that, and it continues to get better. I mean, I'm almost 25 years in business. I think we're at 24, 23. And we're about to put the best version of our product out this year. So it's evolved over time, but it started with me borrowing from people I respected until I knew enough to actually start building on those concepts.
It's funny because, as you're telling the story, I'm looking through so there's the two buckets, right? Which would be the kind of like athletic sports performance bucket and then gym pop bucket. And I got like two different kind of guides through that. Like one, in the sports performance bucket, it was like, actually, Cressy was such a huge influence. And I've been, fortunate because I think, man, like 18, 19 years ago, I was still playing pro ball. I flew to Birmingham, England, to go to a seminar. Right, I've hit
one of Eric Summers.
Yeah, it was him and Nick Grantham.
Okay,
crazy man, a long time ago. Bought all the DVDs, went to lunch, and then later that year, I went to stay with him for like 9 days at the first facility that opened. Right, and it's like I read all the T Nation stuff from him, Mike, and Phil No More, all that stuff, and then Joe D. But both were like it was this. Eric did a great job of taking the West Side model, kind of adapting it for athletics. So I've really dove into that. Worked incredibly for me. Worked for all the athletes I was training.
Really, so did Joe Ken. Joe talks about West Side Barbell's influence in the tier system book.
Huge influence, right? And the thing is, like, the more you do, just like you, right? Like, as you're doing, I think with Eric too, is like he was facing, it's like training high school kids, college kids, eventually, obviously, pros at the highest level. And you're like, oh, man, we can't do that. You start shifting things around, right? Like, same thing for me. I was doing a lot of that. And like because that's the thing, like you got to do the stuff in the real world to filter what actually works and what doesn't. Because, hey, it might, hey, this stuff might work great at West Side. It might work great at, fill in the blank. But here, the population that's coming through, and if, oh yeah, we're doing BFS. You can't stop them doing BFS, bigger, faster, stronger at the high school, if you're not influencing that program directly in there. So now it's like, shit, well, we're not going to be doing this stuff. We're not going to work up to heavy threes and singles. Like, that's crazy, right? So it influences you because you're doing it. And on the other side, a huge influence for me and in a personal, and by the way, like, Mike was a huge influence too, because when I started seeing that model, and what happens first is you fight it because you're like, I know all this stuff.
Yep.
And then as you grow more and you're like, oh yeah, if we want to do more of this at a really high level, you have to streamline it. That you just, or by the way, like, hey, look, you can stay smaller and more unique and have less play. Cool, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're helping a lot of people, you have to create a system that's repeatable. And Mike crushed that, right?
Absolutely.
And we might not even always. And I love Mike, and it's a big mentor for me as well. And we might not even agree on everything, but it's like I agree on a lot of stuff. And the older I get, I agree on more, right?
Yeah.
But by the way, that influenced two things for me, because it's like, honestly, some of the small group system for me was influenced by that. And I started doing small group personal training 15 years ago, right?
Yep.
And then on a semi-private side, same thing, I was very fortunate because Alan Cosgrove was a big mentor for me, right?
Yep.
And he was, doing that before anybody, and that's how we implemented it. And then as you go along and you train more people, to me what's interesting, and I'll share my own, right? Because there's like, borrow to build, is that the sports performance aspect leaked into the gym pop athlete. For me, that's how the athlete for life mentality of program design happened for semi-privates, right? And I have a whole bunch of systems of like, hey, what's the difference between the actual, athlete versus a gym pop person? But it evolved through these filters.
Yes.
Right? But but we could talk about our system. We'll probably do it a little bit, right? Like we'll talk about how you have, I still kind of lean into the R7. You have your P's.
P4 now.
Yeah, the P4, and we'll talk about that. But again, what I want everybody to understand is like, the whole borrow and build is like, it's the cook and chef. Borrow, build. Hey, look, if you're like, don't try to recreate the wheel. Like, if somebody's done it exceptionally well, like, learn from them, be around them, like, get entrenched in them, become a great cook. Make the recipe like they would make the recipe. Like, somebody be like, man, I can't taste the difference, right? And as you learn the rules, you can break the rules. The principles. You can start becoming more of a chef. Try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, based on your experience in being the kitchen. The kitchen is the gym.
Uh-huh.
That's why I think it's really hard for people that are not gym people, coaching people. It's difficult to build training systems,
100%.
And so, but like, let's kind of get to that phase of, all right, you were borrowing a lot, filtering a lot through experience of tons of reps, and then you built your system. And take me like, first of all, like, I want you to kind of explain on the side of the 4 Ps, like how you got there And, you know, because even as you were presenting this in the Built to Last mentorship, you know, you gave a model for like the whole year of breaking down on the reps for main lifts.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh shit, like, okay, you know, everybody's like, hold on. So you guys just got this structured out, like, and here was one of the amazing things, like your guy, Chris, you know, you showed a snapshot of like, he built, basically it took him 3 hours to do programs for 200 basically clients, between athletes and clients and groups and everything else, right?
Yep.
And everybody's like, wow, like what the hell, you know? And we kind of dive into that stuff in the mentorship because, I mean, here's the thing, right? How can you, like, this is what I'm in the process of doing, is streamlining so much so that my coaches have the best systems and they can write programs fast, but the programs are fucking great.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that's what you guys do. But like, take me to that, like how you got to the 4 Ps, kind of what the model is now and the philosophy of the model. Because, you know, Steve Jobs says, right, you can't connect the dots moving forward. You can connect them looking back. So like maybe connect the dots looking back, how you got to this current model.
Okay. So first of all, we went from R7 to P4. It was, God, whenever Mike Robertson released the R7 model, that was the first time that I recognized having a framework to filter your thoughts in different stages of the program through things. So that alone kind of helped me start to think about our training program. Yeah, shout out to Mike, as a training system. And in my mind, it first started with this framework. And in the spirit of borrowing before you build, I was like, all right, I trust Mike. I love how he laid this out. But contextually speaking, there were certain aspects of what they do that we don't do. For example, the reset phase. And we tried it, but individualizing resets depends on the staff that you have and a whole bunch of other things. So we're like, man, we're not really doing that. And there were a couple other things that we changed the language on. Like I think he calls R3 readiness. We call it ramp. So we tried to make it a little bit of our own. But we started to realize that explaining 7 R's to our clients was a little challenging. They couldn't remember 7 R's.
You went Donald Miller on them.
Simplify, don't confuse. That's right. So, and I probably got P4 from somebody else. I don't, you know, because it came to mind too easy. But what we did is we went P4, prime, prep, power, perform. And that is kind of a mashup of the R7 model. Yeah. We've just combined like R1 and R2 and some of those things. So that's how we arrived there. But it is very much to what you said is it was to simplify an understanding of what our clients are going to go through on a day-to-day basis. The anatomy of a training session, if you will. We're going to start here and we're going to end up here. And that has been incredibly powerful in and of itself. And it's probably where most people should start. But if you're open to it, I've got this right in front of me. I just rattle off a lot of the other components of the training system that make sense.
Please, yeah.
So outside of the framework, the other thing that we really realized, or when you start to pull yourself out and you're not doing all the coaching, you need objective ways to evaluate, are people running this program the right way? So we came up with rules, and we can talk about some of those later on. But you need a framework, you need rules. I think you need to decide on your mesocycle structure ahead of time.
So just for people that don't understand what mesocycles are sometimes.
Yeah, so think about a defined training block with a specific adaptation that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so for example, it might be like, hey, I'm trying to build strength and muscle over the next 12 weeks.
Yep. And if we were using that language, for us, that would probably be like a 4-week volume accumulation block.
Yeah.
And then we would go into a 4-week intensification block. And we've recently expanded it into 6 and 6 to simplify the process even more. They have less time to do that. But you want to decide on that.
I'll stop you just for a second because of the 6 and 6. Here's why. I like, because we get really stuck in this, by the way, right? Like, you know, usually these mesocycles 3 to 6 weeks. And people are like, man, you got to do, 3 to 4. People get bored, novelty. What I found is that, like, we can squeeze out more in longer cycles. That's what I found with most general pop, especially too. And most people don't get bored.
No,
that's what I found.
The trainer gets bored before the
client gets bored. And so, but here's the thing. This is the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because you have less programming to do also, because instead of 12, you now have 8 for the year, correct? Right. So real quick, 8 mesocycles instead of 12 mesocycles. But the results are just as good, if not better. All right, so that's what I want to.
And each week, your client should know that there's progression built into it. Right. That's how they stay focused over a 6-week block.
And the thing is like I've yet to see a person that's like continues to improve and goes like, man, I just want to switch it up. Unless you've been doing it for a really long time, but like it's like progress. Oh my God, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting faster. I'm getting more reps in. My conditioning is improving. Right? Like it's the I would say self-determination theory of competence. I'm getting better. That's motivating me. And again, we speak about this because we've ran gyms for like 2 decades each. And it's like, we see this. It's not like I've read in a journal of psychology. It's like, no, man, like I'm running programs. Sometimes for beginners, we'll go like 8 weeks. Sure. And it's like, they just keep getting stronger. They just keep, like, it's awesome. But I wanted to stop it there because sometimes people will say, why are you doing 6 weeks? That's why.
Yeah, and if you're changing stuff every couple weeks because you think your clients need novelty and more variety, like you got to understand, like, you're essentially being trained by your client. You're not training them. Yeah. You're the one with the information. And as long as you can connect them to that training program and they understand the path and the journey that they're on, and they trust you, there should be no problem getting somebody to follow a program for 6 weeks.
100%. Even in that, so I actually have a framework, because you brought up frameworks. I call it, if anybody's ever done Christian Thibodeau's neurotyping, I did neurotyping certification. It's kind of like, some people are novelty seekers. I do like a 75-25 program design, which just means, like, let's say for 6 weeks, the 75% of the program, nicely progressed over time, whatever. The 25% at the end, I'm still getting the adaptation I want, but I might change it. Like arm work. Okay, it's going to be different exercises.
Arms, glutes, finishers, those type of things.
Exactly.
But there's definitely
the big rocks are the same.
Yeah.
And I found that to be very, very successful with novelty seekers. And it's enough of that stimulus of like, I want something new. And they're like looking forward to that last part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a good point, because me and you were super nerdy about this. I'm sure there's people listening to this that are super nerdy. And when you hear stuff like that, like my natural tendency would want to try to like individualize my training system based on something like neurotyping. I respect the heck out of Christian Thibodeau, but there would be a certain threshold of clients where that becomes really impossible.
100%. Yes, absolutely. And by the way, like because I want this is why I want this real conversation, right? Like what I would do and what I do is build finishers, right? And it's like, and look, this is the real thing. Like how many clients come in and go like, I want to shape my glutes. I want to build my glutes. I want to get rid of this flab right here, abs, right? Like, and I would just literally create specific circuits. So it's a drag and drop. So it's a system, 75-25. What is it they want to work on? Boop, boop.
Yep.
Boop, boop. Because now the coach can actually drag and drop and then get them what they want. It's still there's some novelty, but really we're sticking within a system and it's scalable.
Yeah.
And I could agree with that, because I used to I'm the geek. So it's like, I'm going to do this. And it's like, well, we can't do that. We as soon as this gets bigger, we have more coaches, we can't do it. Yeah. But what can we do? And then you kind of take that information and again, borrow to build, right? And you make your own system, Bruce Lee style. So
sometimes we get too smart for ourselves. It's like you really love
you got to dumb yourself down, right?
Yeah, it's like you want to include absolutely everything in there, and it's like sometimes we just get too smart for ourselves. And simple wins, man.
It's the ego, though. Like I think we're kind of better. I'm not saying I'm there yet, but better at like, you're smart enough to let that shit go, knowing that like you're feeding yourself because like, I know all this stuff. So I'm going to show all this stuff. But it's like, does it make the training better? Does it not care? No, like, you complicate, same thing, like as Donald Miller's marketing, but like, hey, if you confuse, you lose. If you confuse in the training programs, you lose, right? Like,
yes.
That's why you kind of brought the 4 Ps down as well. And so, okay, we went through rules, framework,
mesocycles. Next is set and rep schemes, which Luka talked about. Like these can be laid out, for an entire year on various different models. Exercise categories, I think, are important. Like bilateral quad dominant, okay, like i.e. a squat.
Yeah.
But inside of a small group session, there could be 6 people in that group, 10 people in that group, 4 people are doing a squat the same way. The rest of them are doing it a different way based on how they present themselves, right, through whatever assessment process you have. But everybody's going to be on the same template in our gym. So that's how that works.
So, yeah, because the template might be bilateral squat.
But there might be 6 different, and I wouldn't say 6. Yeah. There's probably 2 or 3 different squatting variations that you'd see inside that session.
Yep.
And then from there, it's like designing your exercise pool. This is a big area that Joe Ken influenced me. And over time, what happens is, like, we all know all these exercises. So, like, if I build out bilateral quad dominant, well, what are all the exercises that I know that fit that category? What we could probably do a podcast on that one category. You know what I mean? Like, probably like 50. But here's the question. How many of those do you actually believe the specific clientele you're working with need to do? And then it's probably 3 to 5 variations that lead into some layering, like a baseline level, like that then progresses to the most advanced level. And that's what most people need. They need to decide, what are the 3 to 5 exercises inside this category that I think is best for this clientele?
Yeah, and let's do an example, just shits and giggles, because I think also it depends. Like, for example, we coach a lot of people that are like, hey, we got a 600 square foot gym. What equipment do you have? Right? My bilateral squat is, well, regular back squat, safety bar squat, Smith machine squat, front squat, double kettlebell squat, goblet squat, belt squat, pendulum squat, hack squat, right? Because I got the machines, right? And I love that. But by the way, then we go to small group personal training. Well, the hack, the belt, the pendulum goes out. I might eventually have 3 pendulums because I fucking love it so much. Yep. And add it to small group, right? But like, so those go out the window. So then what does that leave for small group? By the way, back squats out, and people are like, well, why is it not like the back squat? No, dude, like if you saw my small group, it's a lot of different people, right? So we keep a front squat. We do safety bar squat, the box sometimes. We do some isos. We do a lot of goblet squat, kettlebell squat, hanging dumbbell squat. We do a trap bar deadlift, wedge elevated squat. Like, man, I can go, like, we do have a nice little, I would say, and then everybody can do that, right? And if somebody comes in, I can still go like, oh, you're a savage, man, beautiful squat. Cool, you go to the back squat. No problem. I got you. Yeah. But that's the system, right? But in semi-private training, I can't have belt squat. I can't have pendulum. I can't have hack. I can't have Smith machine, right?
Yes.
So that's where, and by the way, if you want to have a great training system, you should categorize, and we're going to get to team development second. So we're going to stay here on the training system. Sure. But it's like, you could, think about it, like, you have to coach people up. You have to have a system and then be able to teach the system so they can very quickly go like, this person's got, yeah, we're doing 8, but they're doing a goblet squat. That's going to be hard for them. They can't do a front squat. Double kettlebell, no, not yet, right? Like, and it's just like, great, you got a goblet squat, right? You got, and I think that's so important, because I think people really kind of jump through this a lot. But I get a lot of questions about this, by the way. Now you will too, if you don't already get them, but it's like progressions, regressions, lateralizations, right? Where lateralization might be like, we're still going to do a squat. It's going to be single leg.
Yeah.
To box. Oh, you can't do that. You're going to have TRX support. Like, I can go through this, like, right? But if you get this thing down, it's a machine. And I don't mean that in a bad factory type of way. I mean, like, you have something that works and works well, and man, you can serve the people to get them to their goals.
And everything's smoother. There's less friction in the design process. You start to create a belief system around the exercises, the way you program. And I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. Like, for example, like Mike Boyle does not have a bilateral quad dominant category. Like, if you don't want to squat and you believe, I'm cool with that. Whatever you believe.
And by the way, he has his reasons.
Right, and that's why you need to have your reasons to do whatever you're doing, right? And then you build a template around that, which makes everything easier.
By the way, it's part of your training systems.
Yep, this is part of the training. You need a template. And then from there, the last couple things are like a perfect session checklist, how to run this session from top to bottom. You need an exercise coaching checklist. So everybody coaches the plank the same way. Everybody coaches the split squat the same way. That's important from a system standpoint. And then the last component is you need some type of training rotation that your trainers are having to prove to either the director or the owner that, like, I know how to do all this. Every quarter, there should be some type of rotation that they have to test out and prove that they actually understand the training system. And I didn't really appreciate that until years ago. I was at Vanderbilt University. I worked with one of their athletes who's been in the NFL quite some time. He's loved at Vanderbilt, so they would let me, as an outside trainer, train him there. And they had a great strength and conditioning staff. And I just remember watching while I was training Jordan, they were taking interns through basically their test out. And I remember just watching that like, oh, wow, that's what's missing. We don't have anything like that. And it's still taken years to figure out like how to do that. So if you're listening to this and you're like, man, everything we just talked about seems like a monster of a thing. Like,
That's okay.
We're talking about
steps. We're sharing so you can kind of cut down the time, but you do need time to develop this for yourself. And again, borrow then build. And by the way, you know, I wanted, this is actually a good time to, because this year we're working on a bunch of different courses and programs where we're going to like open the kimono. One's going to be called the internship, which literally will be like our systems of developing the team. And like a lot of the stuff that you guys are seeing here, right? You're going to basically be able to, I would say, see it, like get the templates, get the everything. So just, again, because we know we get hit up a lot about this, right? Like, how do you do it? What's the philosophy? And how do you develop the team? Okay. So again, that's, but you can go on YouTube. By the way, like I share templates for Athlete for Life, for beginners for fat loss training. They're on YouTube. Like I give them, you know, recovery breakdown, exercise coaching checklist, high level habits. So there's a lot of that out there. But again, we're going to dive deeper and create a whole construct, Andy's 8-week onboarding. Because again, I really do think, one, it's like, how do you, you know, I like this quote, right? How do you build a team? We'll get to kind of the 8-player part, but like, you know, I do it. So that means you gotta exemplify the thing that you want others to see, right? So then I do it, you do it with me, right? You're shadowing me, seeing it, you get all the systems. Then I do it with you. So now you're the head person and I'm shadowing you, watching to make sure you do it right. Then you do it by yourself. And then eventually somebody does it with you, right? So I think that's a very, very important part to it, right? But I wanted to go, let's go, because I like your rules. We got about 30-ish minutes here. I want to pack as much value into this as possible, but
we can go through some of that.
Let's go through some of it, because I want people, here's the thing. I know what people say. What do you mean by rules?
Yep.
And it's like, this is great because we can go over the rules that you have at BCI. So let's go over some of these rules that you have, the training rules that you have.
All right. So first of all, one of our rules is manage ZOA. That is a term that I took from PRI land. ZOA stands for zone of apposition. We are not heavily influenced by PRI. I would say we're slightly influenced by PRI. But one of the things that I think is really important, especially with the adult training population, is minimizing compensatory movement. And people will try to extend their way out of anything. So if you always have your trainers focus on managing the zone of apposition, which is essentially the thorax and the pelvis, making sure they're stacked over top of each other, in all your movements, you get better outcomes on all your exercises. Yeah. So if somebody's, you know, in theory, a half kneel position should keep somebody from extending when they press.
Or it will be better.
It should be better, yeah. But it does not guarantee the right outcome.
Correct.
So while that constraint is good, if we also have a rule, now that coach has something else objective to watch when they're doing that, right? So in every exercise, we want squats to look like squats, and we always want thorax and rib cage stacked. Does that mean that in some type of athletic movement that they'll be able to maintain that? No, they're going to extend in certain moments, but we want them to control what they can control. And then if they need to extend, you know, that's going to happen in life and sport. The second is full range of motion. Unless there's some other reason why we're doing partial, you know, this is something that I see a lot in the adult population, and it's like trainers don't want to encourage a client to go from like here to here. But we're only building strength here. So what happens if, you know, something happens in their life where they have to be strong here? They're not prepared for the demands of life.
Which it will.
Yeah, it will. And if they can't get there, why? And we should be driving things in that direction. The other one is tempo first. I'm an old school Poliquin guy like a lot of guys. And he like tempo is something I'm a big believer in. And we can stick with one exercise for a very long period of time and just introduce different tempo protocols and still get a solid stimulus.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
There you go.
Slow kindles fast.
Technique overload, especially with adults. I think ever since CrossFit, which to be clear, I think CrossFit's done a lot of good stuff, but there's been a heavy bias towards like load, moving a lot of weight. And in my experience, from what I see, not a lot of that pays enough respect to the technique done moving that load.
Man, so this one I want to jump in on here because I'm all about progressive overload. But the foundation is the standard of a very good form. So it's funny, somebody just came in and was like, you know, you guys don't even have to coach much anymore because everybody's form is so good. I'm like, no, that's the thing.
That's the point.
I was like, see that client right there? She's been here for 15 years.
Yeah.
What did you notice? You coach her a lot. I'm like, if I didn't, her form will still be very good, but that's the standard. Always coaching, ABC, always be coaching, right? Like, because now if I know that my standard of form is really good, now we can do the second part, which is load, right?
Yeah.
More reps, more faster speed, more load, whatever it may be. But that I think that a lot of people do this, right? Whoop.
Exactly.
As long as the load's going up, the form, low standards on form, and now we got problems.
Absolutely.
Especially over time.
Yeah, especially with the adult population. Like,
Yes.
a lot of people don't realize how resilient kids are. Like, they can get away with a lot of bad stuff until they can't. Until they're a 40-year-old
Until they can't.
broken, because of how we treated them when they were 16. But adults really need to pay attention to it a lot. It's funny because, like, we've got some adults. We got the guy that worked for NVIDIA I was telling you about. Like, this dude's literally gone from, like, 106-pound kettlebell deadlift to, like, 450 for 5.
It's the best thing.
Yeah, it's incredible. But here's the deal. He didn't have like a big training background. If we had rushed that, like this has been over like 5-6 years,
yeah,
right?
Years.
If we had rushed that, we probably would have broken.
Yeah.
But he's been able to do this relatively pain-free.
Yeah.
The next is reps and reserve, and that's just kind of a way we quantify intensity. But I'll tell you, we're actually moving to VBT for this.
VBT is velocity-based training, so
using devices like accelerometers to measure bar speed that correspond with specific adaptations. So for like our power work and our strength work, we're now starting to give ranges, and we're beta testing this with small groups at the gym. But I think we'll move in that direction. But like reps and reserve is a little bit easier, I think, for people to understand than RPE. But I kind of combine it the way I explain it. So we might say that it's an RPE of 8, but an RIR of 2.
Yeah.
Meaning when you get done with whatever the prescribed amount of reps are, you should be able to do 2 more. That's how we explain it to our clients. It's just a way to keep them playing in the lines to know, like, have I gone too far or is it too light, to provide some guidance on how to create better progressive overload.
I think what's important here too, as I'm looking at time, by the way, we're going to get through a training system today, and we're going to get another one on the development. But I want to stay here because it's great. Like when you talked about like when you have a system and rules and frameworks, it builds confidence in the client. So then there's a part where it's like RIR at the beginning, people are like, what the hell is that, right? And then you have to educate them on like I like to, even like clients at a certain phase, they've never really trained much, but then in month 3, because at the beginning, they're just going to make progress, even with 50%.
They'll just science shows that, yeah.
But then at a certain point in time, I want to go, all right, we're going to go all out on this. And I'm going to push them, right? So they are like, oh, yeah, that was RR2. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to scan here safely, and then we're going to push. They get another 10 reps.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, see, that's 0.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, now you know what 0 is.
It resets perspective.
And it resets perspective. But the thing is, this is why this is important. This is a month-long process, multi-month-long process for some clients. And so we're educators, right? We have a system, we're educating them. And they get way more bought in when we have a system and we educate them on it, because now they're like, oh, shit, okay. Like, I'm learning and I know what's going to get me there. Yeah. So I think that's an important factor, but I'm glad you brought that up because, again, there's one.
Baseline regression progression. So that's something I got from Boyle. And the way I explain it from a rules standpoint is our cards are based on levels. Generally, most people start on a level 1 card for us. Even at level 1, we're going to have a baseline exercise we believe that they should be able to do. Then there's 2 regressions deep, and there's 2 progressions forward.
Yep.
But the next rule is how we make decisions around that. And it's demo, cue, regress. So progression is a lot easier to identify. Right? They can do this easy. They can go to this exercise. They can, for example, for us, you got to be able to do the 106-pound kettlebell 10 times before you can move to like a trap bar deadlift, right? So progression's easier. Regression, a little bit more challenging. So if somebody can't get an exercise right, they just may not understand it and not have enough experience. So what we'll do is we'll give them a visual first. We'll demo it for them, then have them do it. Okay, still not right. We're going to demo again, and now we're going to try to cue them out of this. And I don't care, internal, external, kinesthetic, whatever works, yeah. We'll have a layer of cues to try. If they still don't get it right, then we regress. Right, where a lot of people, I don't think, know when to regress.
Right.
Sometimes regress too early, sometimes never regress to begin with. So,
yeah.
The last one here is always be coaching. And it's like what we call 360 coaching. You probably see this a lot too, where like coaches will be coaching somebody and they're just like,
which body language is another thing.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't, this is systems. again, I've started making videos about a lot of this, which I got really good feedback on the last one with 20 plus visual YouTube coaching skills like that you work on, which is a lot of what we're talking about here too, right? That's part of the practice to build these skill sets. But the always be coaching one, like the 180-degree 360 coaching, this is one of them. And like what I say about body language, right? Just stay straight, hands in pockets. This is big.
Leaning
right?
on the walls.
Leaning on the wall.
All those things are non-optimal. And we want you to get a front view, get an angle, get a backside, get an angle, and just work all around that person in that group. And to me, when you're constantly moving and your eyes are shifting, my brain is more active in that training session, and I pick up a whole lot more.
And it also, like the other thing too, is that what ends up happening is the client is like, man, like, damn, they're looking at all different angles. Like I'll get down and like be in a half kneeling position to the side. Like you're engaged. And by the way, I'm not making that shit up for the show. I can't be doing that for hours and hours a day. I actually just am doing that, right? But the client is like, this is holy crap. Like I've never had somebody coach me like that.
But you think their technique will be better if they know you're watching them like a hawk, as opposed to like leaning on a wall? You know, we've seen some horrific stuff training at gyms, like, you know, trainers just like flipping on their phone while their client's training. And it's like, that's not going to help them get the best workout, right? I think 360 coaching shows them that your intention is to give them attention and guidance. Whereas a lot of times I can go to almost any gym and see an example of somebody paying a significant amount of money for coaching while that person just stands there lost in their brain of what they got to do later on today. And that's not coaching.
And that's why coaching first.
Coaching first.
And like this, I'm not like, this can change your business. Straight up. It's like, you know what this is? Bro, Mission Impossible, a Restaurant Impossible. I used to love watching that show because what would happen, right? They'd come in. Now, sometimes the restaurants would actually have good food, but their margins were off.
It's a turnaround show?
Yeah.
They come and turn it around. No, I never saw that one.
My goodness.
I saw the profit where they did it with a gym and a restaurant.
But the restaurant, it was a Bar Impossible, Restaurant Impossible. I love that stuff.
Bar Impossible.
But it's like some of the time the food would be good, but they were like undercharging. So their margins were off. Their lease was off. Their service was like, so it was like, right? A lot of the time he would come in and be like, yo, the food is not good. Also, it's like, this is not like what people want, right? And at first, they would revamp the menu, right? Revamp the menu, coaching first. Sometimes you got to revamp the training menu, build systems, build frameworks, improve coaching, right? And then you build other stuff on top of it and they turn the restaurants around, right? But like, by the way, if you want to go like, hey, don't believe me, go watch the show. You'll see majority of the time, they had to change the food, okay? Get a new chef sometimes, right? Fire yourself. Sorry. But with that said, because we went through, like, you also have training rules for athletes. We kind of talked a little bit about that. By the way, be supplement, not the show, meaning, right? Not the show. You're the supplement to the other training. Stimulate, don't annihilate. So don't crush the kids all the time with athletes. Lowest system load, right? Again, not highest system load, lowest system load. Minimal effective dose. So again, like doing the least to get the most out of it. Strength is a skill. Practicing the skill is strength, which means, hey, good form. Like constantly, repetitively doing that. Drills don't build skills. Hey, that's like, hey, skill, the agility ladder is not going to get you faster.
It's also we believe heavily in reactive agility has to be in there, not just random drills.
And if you have very little time, like we're going to do reactive agility.
Yeah.
I might do the ladder and warm up. But that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, we don't.
Microdosing sprinting, so like frequency, like we do that too when you don't have a lot of time, but like, hey, you microdose it. And in general, it's a specific continuum of effort, which means you got to plan your training out, especially if you got cycles of off season. Like I got NFL guys right now. Guess what? Right now, we're first phase is like just regaining movement, right? Then second phase is going to be accumulation, and we're going to go to intensification. Then we'll get more specific as it gets closer to the season, right? But again, rules for athletes, Gen Pop athletes. We went through like the 4 Ps. You talked about that. Developing your mesocycles. Here you talked a little bit about like organizing your training matters, but traditional periodization cycles are dying. And with athletes, just really thinking about competing adaptations. Talk a little bit about that, right? The different mesocycle periodization models. And
on the athlete side, or
let's go on Gen Pop. I think there's a lot more people are gonna be. We'll if we can fit it in, we got 13 minutes. Let's see if we can fit it in.
Well, here's what I'll say on the, this is what I see a lot of. I see either absolutely no periodization at all, which would just be kind of like planned randomness. And then I see an over-reliance on conjugate style models. And I do not, I want to be very clear and say, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't think it's needed or optimal for the adult clientele that we deal with. If you're dealing with 25 to 35-year-old ex-athletes, they could probably do a conjugate model on repeat for a long time. A 55-year-old guy, not so much. Even if he played college sports, right. He's got so much mileage on his body, I'm not so sure rotating max effort days has any real merit for him. And there's other ways to maintain power without choosing exercises and using dynamic effort exercises that are a little bit more force dominant than speed dominant, right?
And even, I think too important, I think this is important, but some people get very granular. Like the true max effort method in Westside is working up to 1 RM. We do none of that.
Yeah.
But we do some max effort, right? It's like a 3 to 6, right? Like depending on which exercise.
But still, RIR, you're still leaving some room at the end. Like it's not like 100%.
Nobody's getting to true. No, nobody's getting to true.
And until you know better, it's hard to do better. And a lot of young people who are learning from a lot of really smart people that we all respect can misapply some of this stuff because they just don't know what they don't know, right?
And I think it's important to also understand like training versus performing. Like you might even see me like post a video of somebody trap bar deadlifting 1 RM. That's a test, right?
Yeah.
That's not training, right?
When you were probably worked up to it too,
right,
over the course of
like
weeks.
12 weeks of training. Like, man, let's test this out, right? Like, but that's not the training.
Yep.
So these are important things because sometimes people go like, oh man, I'm doing it. You know, it's like, oh man, you're building a model and it's gonna get somebody per, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's why you got to know your client and you've got to know all this stuff. Like you got to know the rules in order to break the rules. And like the point I make is like, I don't care if you linear, non-linear, undulate, conjugate, concurrent, cybernetic, mixed peer, whatever you want to do. But that term, again, Joe Ken's influence has been big. It's like that term mixed periodization is kind of what we're doing anyway.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what I mean by that, you should go watch the old video that him and Mike Robertson did many, many years ago on this topic.
Joe Ken, Mike Robertson, mixed periodization, YouTube.
Yeah, find it there. I'm sure Mike's got that stuff up there. But here's the way I look at periodization now. It's just planned progression. That's it. It's some type of modeling that shows progressive overload and increase in both volume and intensity. And even with the adult population, I know it's one of the rules, like you shouldn't raise both at the same time, but you absolutely can if you know what you're doing. So I think that's important, is that you just need some type of framework. I think the adult population linear progression is fantastic, and I think non-linear would be kind of a second best. Now that's my beliefs. I'm okay if you want to argue about it, holler at me, we can debate. But on the athlete side, many years I would have told you conjugate is the move. But I started to realize, like, if you look at what kids are doing at school, if you're also running a conjugate model and staying true to the max effort, dynamic effort kind of approach, I don't think you're thinking through this as well as you should.
Yeah.
Or you may not be as aware as I am of like what's going on in my community at those high schools. We have a community where there's 3 very good strength coaches. The rest of the high schools don't really have one. They got like a very well-intentioned coach who's running a program, but he don't know what he don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we find out what kids are doing at school. And if we were to try to apply like my old school Westside Barbell, Charlie Francis mashup, we would be breaking kids. So now we, more so than ever, we fill the gaps. But there is still this framework of volume accumulation and intensification. We never even get to realization and peaking.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like we just rotate back and forth, volume accumulation, intensification. And that keeps them unaccustomed to the training stimulus. It forces some type of adaptation. You know, you're adding more volume into their life from what they've done at school.
But then, you're also microdosing some things that they're
not getting like speed.
Same. Awesome, man. That's a great insight, because I think for most people to kind of understand that, right? Like it's really difficult to kind of systemize that realization phase. It just is. And obviously,
sure,
it's like you're not going to get out of it unless, like, for instance, I'll do that individualized for the NFL guys, the NBA guys, the college D1 guy. Like, hey, you got a whole off season. Cool.
One guy, one sport.
Correct. Absolutely. But you can't, for groups, that's
You got 10 kids playing 3 different sports. They're in 3 different phases of the year. Usually 3 different programs to accommodate that. And that's just not reality.
But the way that you're doing it is, in the way that we're doing it, it works.
Yeah.
It just works. And it's like, even like the micro dosing of things, like, for example, you know, some people go like, well, what, for basketball players, do you do max velocity jumps? And it's like, we do, because like actually in a game, nobody actually jumps max. We're going to keep it very low though. Like we're talking about like 2 sets of 5.
Yeah.
I mean, like 4 sets, 3 to 4 sets of 10-yard acceleration, but you're going to do it 2-3 days a week from different positions, right? Like that type of thing. We're microdosing because we know that like the thing that gets trained the fastest is things like speed, quickness, agility. So we're keeping it in there, but we're keeping it fresh. We're keeping it fast and explosive, like over 90-95% of that max effort. But you're plugging it within those accumulation intensification phases.
Yes. So think about this really, because I want to make this point. I think this will be valuable for anybody that's listening to this to run the sport performance program. I don't know if it was Bondarchuk or whoever created the chart around residual training effects, Isser and Bondarchuk, somebody like that. What happens is, like, if you want to maintain maximal strength, you have about a 30 to 45 day window, I believe, to do that. But if we're talking about max velocity and speed, it's like 5 plus 2. It's like 5 to 7 days. So if you aren't hitting those velocities every 5 to 7 days, you're maintaining at best, probably getting slower. Now here's the deal. Think about every time you've watched a high school football practice, basketball practice, baseball practice. Do you really think when that coach says sprint or whatever situation they're in, they're not?
No, because it's conditioning, so you're saving yourself at all times, right? So,
and they're positioning themselves based on hierarchy. It's like if the fastest guy in the program gears down a little bit, everybody else gears down. And the fastest guy always gears down. You know it. He always, because he can still beat people with less effort. You know.
And so now, but the thing is, what's cool is you actually see how like much of, you know, there are quite a few crossover factors when it comes to gym pop and athletes, because I microdose stuff that would just look different, right? Like they might be doing pogo jumps instead of like they might
humans are humans
going with sled drags because we want to slow them down a little bit.
We use ski erg for power work. And we use bikes for power work for adults.
Those 10 seconds all out. I mean, you got to teach people how to even do that, but like to get there, man, that person hasn't done that for forever at that type of intensity and effort, right? Last part that we have time for, I want to share, like, this is really cool because it's like 12 months of programming, and I'll kind of go through it. Actually, I want you to kind of explain it, but because it's like you have like power, primary strength, secondary strength, which is almost kind of like power, you know, main exercise, supplemental exercise, auxiliary, but then rep schemes going through 12 months, right? So you have power and because you go through these lines. So you're going 3, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3, 6, 4. So just break down like maybe a quarter of this really quickly, because I want you guys to see this. This is the system. Like, it's the system. It works over and over and over again, right? Like,
so this would be, so what I shared was in the context of a non-linear scheme.
Yes.
And this is something that full transparency, my buddy Chris Merritt is very good at like these type of things. And this is something that I learned from him that really made things a lot easier. So what you see is, you know, month 1, we're working 3s. We're not going to talk about volume, but hopefully you guys know what to do with volume, right? But the next month we're going 5s. The next month we're going 6s. The next month we're going 4s. The next month we're going 6s, and then 4s, then 5s, then 3s, then 5s, then 3s, then 4s, then 12s. What I just gave you was 12 months
of power.
Right? That's it.
And that's modulating. So again, if we just stick within Prolep charts high stuff, you go like, 5 sets of 3, 3 sets of 5. You get the drift.
Yeah, right. And then we do the same thing for strength, but the repetitions are a little bit higher, right? Because they're more in that zone. So we go 8, 5, 6, 4, 6, 4, 5, 3, 5, 3, 4, 2. And then we do the same thing with secondary or what might be your auxiliary exercises. And it's just higher reps again. So it's 8, 12, 10, 15, 6, 10, 8, 12, 5, 8, 6, 10. But literally what you just got right there was a year's worth of rep schemes. That makes your programming so much easier and streamlined. And the only person who will make this difficult is you, because there will be a part of your brain that wants to like make this complex. You just understand, I don't care what you believe in. If you want to do this in a linear way, you can do it in a linear way. You know, there's a lot of ways you can do this, but the overarching point is a training system makes things easier in execution. And if right now the way you program is taking you hours a week, you're wasting a lot of time that could be focused on revenue generating activities that will help your business grow, help your coaches get paid more, and will certainly not sacrifice results.
Absolutely. Borrow the damn system. I mean, man, we cover so much. We're literally juicing out on a battery. So here's the deal. But here, we're going to do just another show, another episode on team development. Probably deserves its own. I agree. I 100% agree. But here's the deal. Listen, this is the stuff we teach inside of the mentorship. Everything from the training systems to the team development, to the business systems, to the operation systems, to the marketing. I mean, you name it.
You name it.
Building a real damn business, right? Not like, oh, give me 100 leads. Like, no, the whole shebang. So couple of things. If you are a gym owner with 25 to 30 clients, want to get to hundreds of clients and build a true business that lasts, go to builttolastgym.com. Right, you'll see what we're about. But we also have a mastermind coming up in Austin. We have 4 spots available for non-mentorship members. It's February 7th and 8th in Austin. Just message us. Message me, DM Andy. We'll give you the details. Again, we got 4 spots of it. Like basically, we have about 30 of our mentorship clients coming out. We've already got about 5 spots taken, and we got 3 spots left, 4 spots left. I got to check with Des. But again, we're going to teach 2 days. Like we're diving deep. Like this is the stuff. And again, we're going to listen. If you guys love this show, please share, please leave a review. That's what gets this spread. Again, we want to keep doing more of this free info, give you the best stuff that we can. Again, we're going to do another episode and just bring the fire on team development. If you loved it, let us know. Appreciate you, brother. This was fire. As always, we will see you in the next episode of the Big Life Podcast. Peace out, my friends.